Hello everybody and welcome back. So in this next lesson we're going to be talking about the JSON module. So some of you may know what this is, some of you may not or have even heard of it. So basically JSON is a text format, okay? But it's got a very kind of a special sort of formatting to it and a way that it sort of stores data. So essentially it's a way of us storing a hierarchy of data in a text file, and it comes in super handy. Like, we often need to store config files or different bits of information, and how are you going to store it other than in a text file, particularly one that is still readable to humans. So we don't even need to use Python to edit it. We can actually just go in and change the text file, and yet that data is sort of read by our code and then interpreted as dictionaries and lists, and so that data is sort of interactive. Okay, so it's got a lot of benefits to it because we can sort of manually edit it, we can edit it through code, and it's very easy to work with. It's easy to just sort of write out a config file. And when I say writing out a config file, what I basically mean is sometimes you need to store data outside of Houdini. You can't rely on the HIP file to store everything, or sometimes you don't want to. Something with your pipeline tools, you need to actually store information somewhere. So that's basically what we're going to be using the JSON module for. Now, I say JSON for anyone who's maybe totally new to it and has never even seen it. It's spelled like this, J-S-O-N, okay? It's basically JavaScript object notation, okay? It's not actually like a subset of JavaScript. It's just based on JavaScript, but then works with other languages, and Python being one of them. So basically it's just a way of storing a hierarchy of dictionaries and lists. Okay, so we're going to work through an example because I feel like that's the best way that we're going to sort of understand this module. There are not a lot of functions within the module that we're going to be using. It's more about getting to grips with just the very few functions that there are available and how those are going to help us. Okay. And this, I just want to point out that this is something that you will definitely need. Okay, it is something that you sort of almost can't get away without using this. I guess if you're just using Python for basic HDA things, then sure, maybe you could get away without ever needing JSON, but I don't know, there's always a point where you just need somewhere to store some kind of data, like for example your scene file, your Houdini scene file, where it has your desktops and all your settings and preferences. That's all stored in a file somewhere. So if you're going to build your own tools and have settings or presets or preferences to that tool, you want to store that data somewhere. Okay. All right, so let's jump into an example. We're just going to sort of work through it, and it'll start to make sense. So JSON is a module, a separate module, so we do have to import it. So the first thing we're going to do is just import JSON, okay? And then we're going to build up a dictionary here of some information, some data that we would then want to store. And then I'm going to show you sort of how we store it, and then how we read that data, and kind of how we convert backwards and forwards between JSON data and then Python dictionaries. Okay, so let's begin with creating this dictionary. Okay, so I'm just going to call it my data, and then I'm going to create the dictionary. Now, some people code differently. I know everyone's got their own preferences, but it is very important that you guys start to learn how to format your code correctly. I see a lot of times where people have not indented correctly, And, in certain situations, code will break like that. But worse than it breaking is when it actually allows bad formatting and for there to be no indents or whatever, because then it gets you into the habit of doing it, and then it's just unreadable and it's just a mess. Technically, even though it's just text and we can write it in any way we want, really we should all be writing it in the same way, because you're not the only one reading your code, and you need to learn how other people are going to read it as well. So there is a correct way to do it, right? Now, so when I'm going to start writing a dictionary here, I'm opening this, but I'm not going to just inside of curly braces over here go and start typing my key and my value like that, and then comma, and then do another one, because that is just obviously you're just going to fill up a whole line, and then what happens when you reach the end of the line? Okay, so that's not how you want to work. Okay, so the best way to format this is to, when we hit enter, you see it's going to put it on the same level as this. Okay, so technically this and this are on the same indent level. It's just that this has some text in front of it, but it has not been tabbed in. It has not been indented. So this and this are on the same level. They're on the root level. So that is correct. Okay. Now when we start typing between them, we should indent. Okay, because we're typing something that is in between those. So we indent once. Okay, and then this is where we're going to put all the data that is within this level. Okay, so we're one level into our dictionary. And I'm specifying this because you're going to see when we're working with a hierarchy now, we're going to be having a dictionary within a dictionary within a list within a dictionary. So it's really important. If you format it correctly, then at a glance you can see what's happening. But if you don't, it's just a nightmare. Okay, so we're going to be kind of referring back to our example that we've kind of been running with up till now, where we've had a bunch of humans and a little bit of information on them. Okay, but in this case we're just using a dictionary instead of a class. So I want to store a bunch of information about a few different people, okay, a few different humans. But I could just start inside of here. I could make a list and then start listing all of the different humans and all of the information about them. But what I want to do, and I always do this with JSON files, is you always create a sort of a heading, a key for every list or dictionary that you have. Okay, even if it's the only one in the list, and you'll see in this case it is. There is only going to be in this dictionary, this main dictionary, there is only going to be one key, which is humans. But what if later I want to add one? I don't want to then have to go and, because I assumed that they were all on this level, so instead of creating a key called humans, I just created a list and started listing a bunch of humans. Whereas now if I want to go and add a different category, okay, then I have to now change the level of the depth of my dictionary. I have to go and create humans as a key, take my current dictionary, push it one level down, and then create humans, and then create my other key so that I can have another type. Okay, so I always preempt that by making sure that I have a heading for what I'm about to do. Okay, I hope that makes sense, but if not, I'm sure as you start working with it, you're going to see what I mean. The first time you have to go and edit all of your code to take it one level deeper, you're going to learn very quickly not to do that. Okay, so now inside of here, what I want to do is list a bunch of humans. Okay, now you could technically do it in the way where you would list for example, the key for the human could be its name, and then you could list a bunch of information about them, right? So we could say here, we could create technically a dictionary, okay, like this, and I'll talk about the formatting just now. And we could create a key called Andy, and then the values could be a dictionary, which would be age and whatever, okay? But in this case, I don't actually want to do that. I'm going to just keep all the information on the same level. So I'm going to, instead of having the value for humans to be another dictionary, I'm going to have it be a list. So it's going to be a list of dictionaries, and each dictionary has a bunch of information inside of it. Okay, so we're going to create a list, and again, you see here I've put opened the list at the end of this line, and so when I move to the next line, this list is on the same level as this. Okay, you can see they both start at the same point, right? And then within that, we tab one in. Okay, so this is where we now start our first dictionary. Okay, so our first entry in this list is a dictionary, so it's a list of dictionaries. Okay, now again, see I'm opening it and closing it on the next line, all on the same level, and then in between that we can tab in and create oh no, hang on, sorry, in this case we wouldn't tab in, right? No, we would, yes, sorry. And then we can have here, so we would have something like name, and we should always put a space after there. Andy, right? So that's our first person, and of course, so this is a dictionary, right? So we are going to put a comma at the end, right? And then we would say age, and then give him something, let's make him 22, right, comma, and then eye color, and let's say it's blue, right? Now, I just want to point something out here. In Python, you can finish every line with a comma, including the last one, right? It's not necessary to finish the last line with a comma, but it can be done, and it accepts it both ways, right? When it comes to JSON, though, you do not put it will not accept a comma at the end. But what we're going to be doing now, when we embed this data in the JSON file, it will format it for us. So it's going to change our formatting. There's a bunch of things that we've done that are, Python correct, but not JSON correct here. And that includes then, the comma at the end. It also means these single quotes. JSON does not like single quotes. It only likes double quotes. And there's a bunch of other things. But because of the way we're going to embed it, we can format it for Python, and then we can just pass it into the JSON, and the JSON will sort of fix it for us. Okay. Sorry, I was incorrect before. We need to actually tab this one back, because you can see here, basically, if you ignore all of our braces, look at our actual data. You can see that it has this hierarchy of that's our first thing, then we're inside of humans, and then we're inside of here, we're creating this. So I think that this is the correct way to do it. All right. So we would then, now this gets a little confusing, and this is why I say you need to be very careful what we're doing, right? We're inside of this list. So on this level, we've finished one entry, and like in here, where at the end of every entry we have a comma, we're going to finish this first entry, this first dictionary, with a comma, because we're following it up with another dictionary. Okay, so we're going to open and close, and within that we're going to type name. So let's make Susie, and she is, should we say 26, and then eye color, let's make it green. Okay, and we can finish with a comma or not. Okay, so in this case I won't. I'm going to leave it mixed just to sort of show you that it does work, but it's important to know that it will not work if you go and manually edit your JSON files, so you need to be very careful when you do that. Okay, so here's our dictionary, well, our data so far. And let's double check that this is working correctly. The easiest way is just to print the data, because if we print it, it will print correctly if we have done it correct. So it's going to print on one line, and you're going to see that it says humans, and then we've got essentially a list of humans, right? So there's our list, within which there are two entries, 1 and 2. Each of which are dictionaries that have 1, 2, and 3 keys. Okay, and we could also import pretty print, and we could pretty print our dictionary instead if we want to see the sort of formatting. Okay, so under humans there's our list, and in that there's our dictionary. Okay, right. So now what I want to do, I just want to show you as an example that we can also append to dictionaries, right? So we're just going to create another person. So let's just store it in a variable. So we're going to create Mike, okay? And because this entry, each person is a dictionary, I'm going to create a dictionary for Mike here, right? So we put it on the same line, then tab in the middle, right? So we're creating name Mike, comma, oops, age, should we make him 34, he's a bit older, and then eye color, should we have brown? Okay, so we've created a dictionary now, and then we are going to append this dictionary, right? But remember, we want to add it not to my data, but we want to add it into humans, right? We want to add it to this list, right? So we are appending because it is a list, but we need to access that list first. So we say my data, and then point to the key humans, right? And then to that list, we append Mike, okay? And now if we print my data, then oh, hang on, whoops, we've gone wrong somewhere. Okay, let's try and quickly have a look and see where we may have gone wrong. Oh, accidentally typed a comma over there. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we have 3 entries in our list of humans. Okay, so this is the type of data that we would store, right? You guys would maybe do something like, I mean, you may have a bunch of nodes, for example. So this would be nodes, and then you'd have a list of all the nodes in the scene with maybe certain bits of information on them, and then you'd have another key, which would be, you know, HDAs or then PARMs or whatever, and you could have a list of that. So it doesn't matter, you know, it's just a hierarchy of data, okay? And you can see how you can use a combination of dictionaries and lists. So it could be a dictionary, so it's like a list of dictionaries within a dictionary. So that's the value of one dictionary entry is a list, and that list is a list of dictionaries which each have their own keys and values. So you can mix and match. I mean, this we could have here, name, and this is a string, age is an integer, but then we could have eye color could actually be another dictionary, or it could be another list, you know, like instead of saying blue, we could actually list the RGB values for it, you know, something like that. Or we could have a dictionary where we have name, so the name of the color, and the value is a string called blue, but then we also have RGB as a key, and the value is a list, which is 3 values. So you can just store data inside of data inside of data. Okay. All right, so now that we've got our data to work with, we're going to be talking about JSON and how to actually store this, because this essentially now, I mean, this information, this data is very useful to us. We could go through this dictionary now and ask, okay, how many humans do I have? Well, we would grab the list, the length of the list, okay? We want to say, give me all of the names of these humans, or give me whatever. And so we can work with this information. So what we want to do, then there's the whole purpose of JSON existing, is so that it can store this data for us in a way that we can easily access it again, you know, store it as a string, but convert it back to a Python formatted dictionary. Okay, so let's well, I'll leave my print my data there, but I'm just going to disable it for now so that we're not doing something every time we click apply. Okay. So, first thing we need to talk about is writing the data. Now, I have a folder open over here. This is in that, remember I showed you to create that underscore Houdini sort of place where you can store data. So I've got my HDAs, I've got scripts in here. Those we're going to be building up later in the course. And well, actually very soon. We're going to start the first one, I think, in the next lesson or two. And then in the config file, we also have a project list JSON over here, which that's why I'm teaching you this. We're going to be working with this later as part of our pipeline. But so in this config area, this is where I'm going to store my JSON, just because, well, this is where my JSONs are all stored. Okay. So I'm going to grab a path to this. Okay. And that's where we're going to store. So I'm going to create a variable called, I'll just call it path. Okay, so we're going to say path equals, and then I'm going to give it the path to that file. But remember, I mean, I think it will work with backslashes, but I'm always nervous about that because I know some things are not happy with these backslashes. So I'm just going to go swap them all for /. Okay, so now within this path to config, okay, I also want to give it a file name, essentially. Okay, so because I don't want to store it in this. Okay, so I'm going to go and give it. Let's just create one called foo, because this is just a test. Okay, so foo dot and then JSON. Okay, that's the extension. All right, so that's the path where I want to store it. Now this file does not exist yet. If we wanted to, we could use our information that we learned about the OS module to check whether this exists first, and if it doesn't, we can create it. But what's pretty handy with the JSON function that we're going to use now is it actually, if it doesn't find the JSON file, it creates it for you. So we can kind of skip a few steps there and just use the JSON. But sometimes you might want to be a bit more careful and actually just be deliberate about it. Do the check yourself, create the file, because you might want to set things like read and write permissions and whatever. So you can do all of that using the OS module and then just write to that file. But in this case, let's just let JSON do all the work. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a function called dump. Okay. So it is dumping all of the data into this file. Okay. So it's JSON.dump is the function that we're looking at. Okay. Now what this function wants is, well, it has a bunch of arguments that we can give it. Okay, so you can even Google and search for the list of arguments, but a lot of them are kind of irrelevant when you're doing basic things. Primarily what it wants us to do is give it the data. Okay, so the data that we actually want to store, and then it wants to give it wants us to give it the file where it should store that. Okay, and then it also has a bunch of optional arguments, but I'm going to talk mostly just about two, but we'll get to that. So first, let's start with this. So our data is here. We've stored it in a dictionary called my data. Okay, and in JSON it must be a dictionary, right? Yes, it can have lists and things inside of it, but it must be a dictionary. The actual, so my data, the type, is a dictionary. Okay, so we store that in there. And then the file where we want to store it is just this path. Okay, so this is what we want to do. But what we need to do first is actually open that file. Okay, so we cannot just run the JSON.dump. We need this file. This needs to be an opened file, right? And remember, we spoke in the OS module lesson about opening files. Now, you can do it the long way around, okay, which would be like this. So we would say, let's store it in a variable called file. So we'd actually say file equals, and then we would open our file, which is this. It's called path, and we'd open it with write mode, because we're wanting to override it. So we don't care what's in there. We just want to open it and override it with this. Okay. Then we would write to that file, and then we have to say file.close. Okay, so this is the long way around of doing it, and it will work. So we've got our path, everything seems fine, so let's try this, right? So we click apply, and then over here you'll see that it has created foo.json, and when we open this up, right, and you can open it in PyCharm, I've already set my JSONs to open in PyCharm. I don't know if yours will automatically do that if you've only recently installed it, or whatever other program you want to read it in. But you'll see, you can right click and say, okay, set JSONs to open in PyCharm. Okay. So here you'll see it has stored our dictionary. One issue though is that it's all in one long line, which I don't like. Okay, I'd prefer it to be correctly formatted with indentations, right? But then let's note, okay, you see here, like I said, it doesn't like single quotes, so it's changed it to double quotes. You'll also see it does not have the trailing comma after Andy, after the eye color. Okay, so it's dropped that. And it does, in fact, it doesn't have it anywhere, right? So it has correctly formatted this to a dictionary that JSON is happy with. Okay. Now, let's close this back down again. So this is the long way around of doing it, but there is a preferred method over doing it like this, and that is using the with function. Okay. So when we say with, and it's one of those purple ones where we have the space, right? So we say with, and then we feed it a function. So we're sort of giving it this function to do with, right? So we say open, so with open, and then we feed it the path. So it's like running our open function here. It's exactly the same. So we're going to do open and then W, right? But then we give it a variable. So instead of giving it the variable here, file equals open, we say with open as file. Now what this does is that basically this file is opened but only within this block. And so it automatically closes it. And there are also additional benefits to this apparently with sort of exception handling and stuff. I've never used that before. I'm really not sure exactly what that is, but this is basically the preferred method, and there are additional benefits besides the fact that you don't have to remember every time to close the file. Because the thing is, it will work if you don't close it. But that's a bit of a problem. You know, now you've got all this memory that's being taken up by all these files that you've opened up. Okay, so this is just kind of foolproof. So you're opening up the file, doing something with it in the block, and immediately closing it as we exit the block. Okay, so what we would do inside here is basically exactly this line. We would just do JSON dot dump, and then we give it the data, we give it the file to store it in, and then that will work. Okay, so let's just try this again. So I've disabled this, right? And in fact, we could come here and let's maybe close PyCharm and delete our JSON over here just to make sure that we're sure that this is running correctly. And then when I click apply, again, you'll see it has created foo.json. And when we open it up, although it's very, very nice and fast the way this opens, there we have it. It has correctly created our JSON file. All right. So now I'm not going to close that. I'm going to leave it open because it does update nicely. So when we do update it, you'll see it'll update in PyCharm. So, okay. So let's talk about these optional arguments for dumping, right? So it's got a whole bunch. You can look them all up, but really the ones that stand out to me are the ones. So the sort keys is, whoops, let's spell keys correctly. Sort keys is one of the really good ones. Okay, so that is within your, your keys within the value. So here you've got like within your dictionary. Sorry, so you've got age, name, and eye color. Well, it should, sometimes you wanted to sort age, eye color, name because they're alphabetical, right? So you're going to be sorting based on your keys. Okay, so that we can set that to be true, right? So that's one way that we want to sort of alter the formatting of this. And then what we also want to do is set our indent. Okay, indent. Now what the indent is going to do, let's just give it a value. Let's just give it 4. Okay, so now when we click apply, what you're going to see is that it actually formats it nicely for us, right? And I mean, you can see that the formatting kind of matches what we had before, right? And the size of this indent is determined by that argument. So if we change this to 1, then when we come here, it is squashed down to only a 1 character indent. If we set that to 10, then our indenting is going to be massive. Okay. And PyCharm's pretty good. You see here, it actually draws the lines of the indents. Okay, so normally we'll stick to a 4. I believe that 4 is the size of the indent that that PyCharm normally uses. So I think we are sticking to 4 just for that, because we kind of want it to be consistent, right? You can make the indent whatever you want, but I always stick to 4. Okay. All right, so now we are able to write our data to a JSON file. And don't forget, like I said, this is a text file, right? I mean, you can open it up in PyCharm, but you could also open it up in like Notepad or something. You can open this file, and then you can edit something. So we could even go and change Andy's age over here to 25, and he would now be 25. Like once we save this, right? Obviously, if I run this again, it's going to be overwriting that data. So, it's going to change it back, but see, you're not normally writing and reading it in one script. You'll have one script that will write the data, and then you'll have another one that reads it. So you are able to go in and manually make changes, and then read it in, and you'll read those changes. Okay. So let's come and disable this section over here, and we're going to move on to how to read some data. Okay. So the function we're looking at is json.load. Okay, so dump is to store the data, load is to read the data. Okay, so again, we're going to do the same thing, the with, because we have to actually open that file, right? So we're going to say with open. We're going to point to the path. In this case, we're now opening it just with read mode, and we'll just give it the file variable again. Okay, and now when we say json.load, we feed it the file that we want it to read from, but this is going to return some data for us. It's going to return a Python dictionary object for us. So we need to store that somewhere. So I'm just going to create a variable to store that within. Okay, and then outside of this block, I'm going to print the data that was stored. Okay, because see, within the block, it opens the file and then stores some data in a variable. But we don't need to still be within that block to now read the data. Once it exits, it closes the file, but the data is still written into our variable. Okay, so now when I print our variable, you'll see in here, in fact, I'll give it a few spaces so you can see, here it has printed our dictionary. Okay, now you'll see it does have the U in front of it here for the Unicode sort of formatting, but that's just, these are still strings. It's just like, remember when we put the R in front of the strings to force it to be raw? So that's kind of what's happening here. It's just what happens automatically when converting from JSON to Python. Okay, and you'll see here that it has gone back because we've got our single quotes back. It's not going to go and put our trailing comma back at the end of iColor blue for Andy, but it does at least convert the quotes back to single quotes, okay, and any other formatting that it has done. So this is how we now grab our data, and this is a functioning Python dictionary. It is not just a string, okay, although in JSON format, see, this is a string. Okay, like when we load it back in, we can load it as a string from that text file. We can just read it as a string, but then what JSON kind of uses the string as a way to format itself. Okay, so now when it converts back, it actually creates a proper functioning Python dictionary. So when we say data humans, right, it's going to return something, the list. Okay, because it's that we've given it the key, so it's going to return the value, which is a list, and we could take that list and grab the first entry in that list, right? And then within that we could grab the name, right? And it's going to print Andy. Okay. All right. So now that we know how to write JSON files and read them, okay, as well as actually create correct data to go into them, let's talk about, there's two additional functions that I want to show you. So we've learned about dump and load, but you'll come across this function dump s and load s, okay? So obviously I know that looks like, when you read that, it looks like dumps and loads, but this is not a plural, okay, or a present tense. It's basically dump string and load string, okay? That's what the S stands for. So let's talk about what these do. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to print my data again, because I want us to be aware of the our dictionary in its raw form. Okay, so this is what our dictionary looks like before it goes into the JSON file. Now when we use dump s, what that is essentially saying, so JSON.dump s, we feed it data the same way that we would within the dump function, okay, but we don't feed it a file to store it in. Because dump s, instead of storing it in a file, is going to just essentially print and return a string for us that has been formatted for JSON. So the dump function, when it writes to this file, is taking our data, converting it to JSON, and then writing it in the file. Dump s is doing the same thing except for the writing it to the file part. So we don't need to do it within an open function, right? And we don't need to provide a file for it to store it in, because we need to give it a variable where it's going to do it. It's basically doing the exact same function, but doing it just within our code, okay? Because sometimes you want to actually create and store the JSON formatted file first. Then you might want to even make changes to that string before then writing it into the actual JSON file itself. Okay, so here we would say, let me just call it test equals JSON.dumps, okay, dump s. And shall we print test to see? So now I'm printing both my data and test, so you're going to see the difference. So I'm going to give a few lines and then click apply. So you'll see here it has printed our original dictionary, and then here it has printed our JSON dictionary, okay? And then conversely, load s, so JSON.load s, is reading a string. So we feed it a string, and then it will basically return a Python dictionary from that. So it's essentially the same thing that the load function is doing, where it's taking JSON formatted string and converting it into a Python dictionary, except instead of doing it from file, it's doing it directly within our scene. So we do not give it a file, okay? If we fed it something like path, the thing is it's not actually looking at the file that is at this location. It's grabbing this string, looking at these characters and saying, hang on, is this a JSON dictionary? Not the file, but actually literally these characters, okay? So what we want to do is, if we've got a JSON file, a JSON string inside our scene that we want to read and convert to a Python dictionary that we can work with, we use load s, okay? So in this case, we would feed it, so we've stored our Python, this JSON string, JSON formatted string as test, okay? So let's take our test and convert it to a Python dictionary. So now when I say print, we need to store that in a variable, so let's just call it, I'm going to call it data, because we've already got one called my data, so I'm just going to say data just so that it's different, and I'm going to print data. So here we're printing our original dictionary, we're converting it into a JSON formatted string, storing it in a variable and printing it. We're then taking that string converting it back to a JSON file, a Python dictionary, and printing that. So we should have a Python dictionary, a string that looks like a JSON dictionary, and then another Python dictionary. Okay, and that's exactly what we get. Let me give a few lines so we can see. That's our original dictionary. There's our string, and here is our converted dictionary, which went, so we converted into the string and then back to Python. Okay, so I know that can get a bit complicated, but you'll see, if you start Googling for help on like how to work with JSON files or whatever, you're going to see a combination of some people using dump s and load s, and then some people using dump and load. Okay, it depends if you're wanting to write it directly to the file and read it from a file, or whether you're wanting to create it and then manually store it in the file, like maybe using your OS module. So you can just, or you can write to the file or store it in the scene, alter it first, and then write to the JSON file, or whatever you need to do. Okay. So yeah, this pretty much wraps up JSON. As you can see, we're going to use it in our when we're creating the pipeline tools. We're going to create a project list. So you'll see later on, sort of in a more real-world example of how useful this can be. But basically, you can store any information you want, right? In fact, just the other day, I was creating a JSON file at work where we're storing presets and defaults for a bunch of custom nodes that we'd created. Okay, so it sort of looks at the project name and says, well, if I can't find the project name in this list of keys, then just go to the defaults. So there'll be one key, which is the global sort of general defaults. But it looks through the other keys and says, hey, can I find the project name in here? And if it does, then it means that we've gone and overwritten certain defaults in that project. And then it will go and say the sort of the node type and then which parameters should be set differently. So then every time the user drops that node down, because they're inside of that project, it picks that up and it drops it down with a bunch of different presets. Okay, so that's kind of one real-world way of using JSON files. But again, as we build our pipeline tools together in this course, you're going to see we're going to create our little project list and a way to sort of write to it and read from it. Okay, so I hope that was useful to you, and I'll see you all in the next lesson.